The neon lights of Stellar Junction Diner buzzed and flickered in the artificial atmosphere of Kepler Station, casting an eerie glow over the worn metal tables and cracked vinyl seats. The diner had seen better days, much like the station itself, which served as a refueling stop for cargo haulers, merchants, and anyone else brave enough to venture through the Outer Rim territories. The air recycling system wheezed constantly, mixing the scents of synthetic coffee, alien spices, and industrial lubricants into a cocktail that somehow managed to be both nauseating and oddly comforting. Zira hunched over her steaming bowl of nutrient soup, her iridescent purple scales catching the harsh light. Unlike the magnificent dragons of ancient Earth legends that humans love to tell stories about, Zira was small and fragile, barely reaching the chest of an average human. Her wings, once capable of carrying her through the crystal caverns of her homeworld, now hung useless and twisted at her sides, damaged beyond repair in the mining accident that had claimed her family and left her stranded on this forgotten station. She stirred her soup with a shaking clawed hand, trying to ignore the whispers and stares from the other patrons. Being the only draconian on Kepler Station made her a curiosity at best, a target at worst. The monthly disability stipend from the Galactic Welfare Council barely covered her basic needs, forcing her to stretch every credit and make each meal last as long as possible. The diner's door chimed with the arrival of new customers, and Zira's sensitive hearing picked up the heavy footsteps and guttural laughter before she saw them. 3 Vorthan mercenaries swaggered in, their gray, chitinous exoskeletons gleaming with weapon attachments and combat modifications. Vorthans were known throughout the galaxy as aggressive opportunists, taking whatever jobs paid well regardless of moral implications. These 3 bore the insignia of the Crimson Claw Syndicate, one of the more ruthless organizations operating in the outer territories. The leader, a scarred veteran whose left antenna had been replaced with a cybernetic implant, surveyed the diner with calculating red eyes. His companions, both younger and eager to prove themselves, flanked him as they made their way to a table near the center of the establishment. Other patrons quickly averted their gazes and focused intently on their meals. Recognizing the type of trouble these 3 represented, Zira kept her head down, hoping they would ignore her presence. She had learned long ago that drawing attention from the wrong individuals could lead to situations far worse than hunger or loneliness. The Vorthans ordered their meals loudly, making crude jokes about the other species present, and discussing their recent acquisition of cargo from a merchant vessel that had been careless with their route planning. For nearly an hour, Zira managed to remain invisible, slowly working through her soup, while the mercenaries consumed large quantities of synthetic alcohol and grew increasingly boisterous. She was preparing to leave when disaster struck in the form of her worn eating utensil snapping in half, the metal fragments clattering loudly against her bowl and onto the floor. The sudden noise cut through the ambient chatter of the diner, and every head turned toward her table. The lead Vorthan's cybernetic antenna swiveled in her direction, focusing on her with mechanical precision. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying the clicking undertones common to his species. "What do we have here? A little broken bird, trying to eat with the real people." His companions laughed, the sound like grinding metal against stone. Zira frantically tried to clean up the broken utensil, her claws scraping against the floor as she gathered the pieces. The simple task that should have taken seconds stretched into an eternity under the hostile stares of the mercenaries and the uncomfortable silence of the other patrons. "Look at those wings," the youngest Vorthan said, pointing with one of his 4 arms. "Looks like someone already took care of the flying problem. Must have been a real spectacular crash to mangle them that badly." Zira flinched as if struck, her scales shifting to a darker shade of purple that indicated distress among her people. She clutched the broken utensil pieces tighter, fighting back tears that she refused to let fall in public. The accident had taken everything from her. Her family, her ability to fly, her home, her future. Having strangers mock her greatest trauma felt like reopening wounds that had never properly healed. The lead mercenary stood and approached her table, his heavy footsteps echoing in the now silent diner. "I'm talking to you, scale rat. Don't you have any manners? When someone addresses you, you respond." Zira looked up with terrified golden eyes, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry." I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I was just trying to eat. Just trying to eat? The Vorthan mimicked in a mocking tone, using broken tools because you're too pathetic to afford proper ones. Do you know what we do with defective merchandise where I come from? Before Zira could respond, the mercenary's backhand caught her across the face, the force of the blow sending her sprawling from her chair onto the cold metal floor. Her bowl followed, spilling the remaining soup across the deck, plating and splattering her already worn clothes. The pain was immediate and sharp, but the humiliation cut deeper than any physical wound. We throw it away, he finished, standing over her fallen form. Because broken things serve no purpose except to take up space that useful individuals could occupy. The other patrons watched in uncomfortable silence, their expressions ranging from sympathy to disgust to indifference. None of them moved to help or intervene, understanding that involving themselves in mercenary business could easily make them the next target. In the Outer Rim territories, survival often depended on knowing when to look the other way. Zira struggled to push herself up, her damaged wings making the simple task nearly impossible. The Vorthan leader placed his armored foot on one of her wings, pressing down just enough to cause pain without breaking bones. Maybe we should teach this little reptile some respect, he said to his companions. Show her how things work in the real galaxy. The younger mercenaries eagerly agreed, already rising from their seats and approaching with predatory grins. Zira closed her eyes and prepared for the worst, knowing that her small size and physical limitations left her defenseless against 3 trained killers. The diner's door chimed again, the sound barely registering over the pounding of blood in Zira's ears. Heavy boots echoed across the floor, different from Vorthan, footsteps more rhythmic, more purposeful. She heard someone clear their throat, the sound carrying an authority that hadn't been present in the establishment moments before. "Excuse me, gentlemen," a voice said in perfect galactic standard, though tinged with an accent that Zira couldn't immediately place. "I believe you've dropped something." The pressure on her wing disappeared as the lead Vorthan turned toward the newcomers. Zira opened her eyes and saw 3 figures standing near the entrance, their appearance immediately marking them as human despite the dim lighting. They wore the standard coveralls of mechanical technicians, the fabric stained with various fluids and marked with the patches of independent contractors. Their tool belts hung heavy with implements designed for ship repair and maintenance. The tallest human, a woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, stepped forward with her hands clasped behind her back. Her stance was relaxed but ready, like a coiled spring waiting for the right moment to release. Her companions, 2 men of varying ages, flanked her in a formation that suggested military training despite their civilian occupation. "I don't see anything on the floor except garbage," the lead Vorthan replied, his cybernetic antenna focusing on the newcomers. "Are you humans suggesting that I'm blind?" The woman smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. "Not blind, just lacking perspective. You see, that young lady you've knocked down happens to be under our protection now." "Your protection?" The Vorthan leader laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. 3 grease monkeys against trained Crimson Claw operatives? I've heard that humans are supposed to be clever. But this seems remarkably stupid, even for your species. The other mercenaries had turned their attention fully to the humans now, their hands moving instinctively toward concealed weapons. The diner's atmosphere grew thick with tension as other patrons began quietly sliding toward the exits, recognizing the signs of an impending confrontation. "We prefer the term engineers," the woman said calmly. "And you'd be surprised what clever engineering can accomplish with the right motivation." Zira watched in amazement as the humans maintained their calm demeanor despite being outnumbered and apparently outgunned. She had heard stories about human stubbornness and their tendency to involve themselves in conflicts that weren't their concern, but seeing it firsthand was both terrifying and strangely hopeful. The lead Vorthan's expression darkened, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "This is your last warning, humans. Walk away now, and pretend you never saw anything here. Your species may have some reputation for being difficult to kill, but 3 civilians against trained killers is still a losing proposition." "You're absolutely right," the woman agreed, reaching slowly into her tool belt. 3 civilians against trained killers would be completely unfair. She pulled out what appeared to be a standard plasma torch, the kind used for cutting through damaged hull plating during repairs. Her companions followed suit, producing similar tools along with what looked like a portable gravitational manipulator and a high-frequency sonic cutter. "That's why we brought proper tools," she finished. The youngest Vorthan laughed nervously. "Construction equipment against military-grade weapons? You really are as crazy as the stories suggest." "Let me tell you something about human engineering," the woman said, activating her plasma torch with a soft hum. The cutting flame extended to twice its normal length, glowing with an intensity that made the surrounding air shimmer. "We don't just build things. We build things that work under impossible conditions, that function when everything else fails, and that can be adapted for purposes their designers never imagined." She gestured to her companions, who began activating their own equipment. The gravitational manipulator powered up with a low whine, while the sonic cutter produced a high-pitched tone that made Zira's scales vibrate uncomfortably. "More importantly," the woman continued, her voice taking on a harder edge, "we really don't like bullies." The lead Vorthan's cybernetic antenna twitched as he calculated the odds. Military weapons were designed to be efficient and deadly, but they were also predictable. Construction tools, especially in the hands of humans who understood their full capabilities, represented an unknown variable that his tactical programming couldn't properly assess. "You're making a mistake," he said, though his voice carried less certainty than before. "The Crimson Claw doesn't forget insults, and we don't forgive interference in our business." "Good thing this isn't your business then," the woman replied. She knelt beside Zira, offering her hand without taking her eyes off the mercenaries. "Can you stand, sweetheart?" Zira nodded shakily, accepting the offered assistance and struggling to her feet. The human's hand was warm and calloused from years of manual labor, but gentle as she helped steady the young draconian. Close up, Zira could see the various scars and burns that marked the woman's arms, evidence of countless hours working in dangerous conditions around volatile machinery. "My name is Sarah Chen," the woman said quietly. "These are my partners, Marcus and Pavel. We're going to make sure you get home safely tonight." I don't understand," Zira whispered. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Because someone should, and because humans have a saying. If you pick on someone our size, you'd better be ready to deal with someone your size." She stood and faced the Vorthans again, her tools still active and ready. "Now, gentlemen, I believe you owe this young lady an apology." The tension in the diner reached a breaking point as both sides prepared for what seemed like an inevitable confrontation. Other patrons had mostly cleared out by now, leaving only the essential staff and a few individuals too curious or too drunk to recognize the danger they were in. The lead Vorthan's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the situation. 3 humans with improvised weapons shouldn't have posed a significant threat to his team, but something about their confidence and the stories he had heard about human unpredictability made him hesitate. Their species had a reputation throughout the galaxy for achieving impossible victories through sheer stubbornness and creative thinking. "This isn't over," he finally said, signaling his companions to stand down. "But I'll remember your faces, humans. All of them. We're counting on it," Sarah replied with a smile that promised future complications for anyone foolish enough to test her resolve. The Vorthans began backing toward the exit, their weapons still holstered but hands hovering near their grips. The lead mercenary kept his cybernetic antenna focused on Sarah, while his biological eyes scanned for potential escape routes or tactical advantages. The younger members of his crew looked confused by their leader's decision to withdraw, clearly expecting a different outcome to the confrontation. "Boss," the youngest Vorthan whispered urgently, "we're really going to let these tool pushers scare us off? What's the Claw going to say when they hear about this?" The leader's mandibles clicked in irritation. "The Claw pays us to think, not just to kill. Sometimes thinking means knowing when to choose a different battlefield." Sarah maintained her position between Zira and the mercenaries, her plasma torch still active and casting dancing shadows across the diner's worn interior. Marcus and Pavel had spread out to flank the Vorthan's retreat route, their own tools humming with ready energy. The gravitational manipulator in Pavel's hands created a subtle distortion in the air, making nearby objects appear to shimmer and bend. "Smart choice," Sarah said calmly. "But before you go, I want to make sure we understand each other perfectly." She took a step forward, and the lead Vorthan automatically took a step back, his training warring with his instincts. Every tactical manual he had ever studied said that humans were simply another species of omnivorous mammals, slightly above average in most physical categories but nothing exceptional. Yet something about these three individuals radiated a quiet confidence that set his threat assessment protocols screaming warnings. "This young lady," Sarah continued, gesturing to Zira without taking her eyes off the mercenaries, "is going to continue eating her meals here in peace. She's going to walk through this station without fear of harassment. And if anyone has a problem with that arrangement, they can discuss it with us. You can't protect her forever," the lead Vorthan said, though his voice lacked conviction. "This is a big station, and accidents happen all the time in the Outer Rim." Marcus spoke up for the first time, his voice carrying a slight accent that suggested one of the colony worlds. "Funny thing about accidents. They tend to happen to everyone equally. Sometimes they even happen to people who think they're too tough for accidents to touch." The sonic cutter in his hands emitted a brief pulse of sound that made the Vorthan's chitinous exoskeletons vibrate uncomfortably. The youngest mercenary winced and took another step backward, clearly unused to facing opponents who could affect him through his natural armor. "Is that a threat?" the leader demanded, though he continued moving toward the exit. "It's a fact," Pavel said quietly, his own accent marking him as originating from one of the asteroid mining colonies. "Gravitational fields don't care how tough your shell is. High-frequency sound waves don't respect your rank or your reputation. And plasma torches cut through pretty much everything when properly applied." To demonstrate his point, Sarah adjusted her torch and directed the flame toward a nearby metal support beam. The industrial-grade plasma sliced through the reinforced steel like it was paper, sending a shower of sparks across the floor. The demonstration lasted only a few seconds, but the message was unmistakably clear. "The thing about construction tools," she explained conversationally, "is that they're designed to work in the most hostile environments imaginable. Deep space, asteroid fields, gas giant atmospheres, neutron star proximity. If they can function there, they can function anywhere." Zira watched the exchange with growing amazement. She had never seen anyone stand up to Crimson Claw operatives before, let alone force them to retreat. The humans' casual confidence in the face of trained killers seemed almost supernatural, but their tools and techniques were clearly grounded in practical engineering knowledge. The lead Vorthan reached the diner's exit and paused, his cybernetic antenna swiveling to focus on each human in turn. "This conversation isn't over," he said finally. "The Crimson Claw has a long memory and longer reach." "So do engineers," Sarah replied cheerfully. "We've got people working on stations throughout this entire sector. Funny how many critical systems can develop unexpected malfunctions when the wrong people start causing trouble." The mercenary's expression darkened as he considered the implications. Independent contractors like these three had access to virtually every major installation in the Outer Rim territories. They maintained life support systems, artificial gravity generators, atmospheric processors, and 1,000 other critical components that kept civilized space functioning. Antagonizing them could lead to the kind of systematic inconveniences that made life very difficult for traveling mercenaries. "You're playing a dangerous game," he warned. "We prefer to think of it as aggressive maintenance," Marcus said with a grin. "Sometimes, systems work better when certain incompatible elements are removed from the equation." The Vorthans finally left, the diner's door chiming their departure with what sounded almost like relief. The remaining patrons slowly returned to their meals, though conversations remained muted and eyes continued to dart nervously toward the entrance. The staff began cleaning up the spilled soup and broken utensils, their movements quick and efficient as they restored order to their establishment. Sarah powered down her plasma torch and turned to Zira, her demeanor shifting from threatening professional to concerned caregiver in an instant. "Are you hurt? That looked like a pretty solid hit you took." Zira touched her face where the Vorthan had struck her, feeling the tender spot where bruising was already beginning to form. "I'm okay. It's not the first time something like this has happened." "Well, it's going to be the last time," Pavel said firmly. He was already pulling a medical scanner from his tool belt, the device designed for detecting structural damage in ship components but easily adaptable for biological assessment. Marcus, can you get the lady a new meal? On us. Already on it, Marcus replied, heading toward the counter to speak with the establishment's cook. His movements were casual but alert, maintaining awareness of the entrance and potential threats while handling the domestic task. Sarah guided Zira back to her table and helped her settle into the worn chair. What's your name? Sweetheart? Zira, she replied quietly. Zira Thal Vess of the Crystalline Peaks clan. Or, I was, before. She gestured helplessly at her damaged wings. Before the accident, Sarah finished gently. Pavel told me about what happened on Draconum 7. The mine collapse that took out the primary support structures. We were working on a nearby installation when the emergency signals went out. Zira's golden eyes widened in surprise. You were there? During the rescue operations? 3 days straight, Pavel confirmed, running the medical scanner over her injuries. Trying to stabilize the remaining tunnel networks so the search teams could reach survivors. Lost a lot of good people in those caves, including some friends of mine who went in when the first support started failing. The pain in his voice was genuine, and Zira found herself re-evaluating her assumptions about humans. She had heard they were efficient workers and reliable contractors, but she hadn't realized they put themselves at personal risk to help other species during disasters. I remember hearing about human engineers working around the clock, she said slowly. My family was trapped in the lower levels when the cascade collapse started. They said humans were the last ones to evacuate, that they stayed until every possible survivor had been recovered. That's what we do, Sarah said simply. When things go wrong, somebody has to fix them. Usually that somebody turns out to be us. Marcus returned with a fresh bowl of soup and a proper eating utensil, setting them down in front of Zira with a gentle smile. Cook says this one's on the house. Apparently the management doesn't appreciate customers being assaulted in their establishment. Thank you, Zira whispered, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. But I don't understand why you're helping me. I can't pay you anything. And I'm not important enough for anyone to care if something happens to me. Everyone's important enough, Sarah said firmly. And as for payment, consider it professional courtesy. We engineers have to stick together. I'm not an engineer, Zira protested. I can barely take care of myself. You survived a mine collapse that killed most of your clan, Pavel pointed out. You've managed to stay alive on a frontier station with limited resources and no support network. You've figured out how to stretch credits, avoid dangerous people, and maintain your dignity in circumstances that would break most individuals. If that's not engineering a solution to impossible problems, I don't know what is. Zira felt tears forming in her eyes as she processed the first genuine encouragement she had received since the accident. The human's matter-of-fact assessment of her survival skills reframed her daily struggle as something admirable rather than merely pathetic. Besides, Marcus added, settling into a nearby chair, we've got a professional interest in making sure this station remains a safe place for travelers. Bad for business when word gets around that certain establishments tolerate customer harassment. Speaking of business, Sarah said, pulling out a small tablet and activating its display. Zira, what kind of work experience do you have? Besides survival engineering. Work? Zira looked confused. I was studying crystal harmonics before the accident. My people use resonance patterns to shape and strengthen mineral formations for construction and art, but that was all theoretical, and I never completed my certification. Crystal harmonics, Pavel repeated thoughtfully. That's essentially applied physics with a focus on material stress analysis. Marcus, didn't we just bid on that contract to repair the resonance chambers at the Helix Nebula mining platform? The one where they keep having structural failures because they can't get the frequency modulators properly calibrated, Marcus confirmed. Standard human tech doesn't interface well with the crystalline components they use in their extraction systems. Sarah's eyes lit up with possibility. Zira, would you be interested in working as a consultant? We could use someone who understands crystal harmonics to help us design better integration protocols. I don't know, Zira stammered. I've never worked with humans before, and my wings. She gestured helplessly at her damaged appendages. Wings are for flying, Pavel said practically. We work in space, where flying doesn't help much anyway. What matters is what you know, and whether you can apply it to solve problems. The pay would be standard contractor rates, Sarah added, showing Zira figures on her tablet that made the young Draconian's eyes widen in shock. Plus hazard bonuses for deep space work and a full medical package. First priority would be getting those wings properly treated by specialists, instead of just stabilized by station medics. Zira stared at the tablet's display, unable to believe what she was seeing. The monthly wage they were offering was more than her disability stipend provided in an entire year. Medical treatment that might actually restore some function to her wings had been an impossible dream until this moment. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for someone you just met? Because we can, Sarah replied simply. Because talent shouldn't be wasted just because someone's had bad luck, and because the galaxy becomes a better place when people help each other instead of looking for reasons not to. Marcus leaned forward slightly. There's also the practical consideration that humans work better in teams. We've learned that diverse perspectives solve problems faster than homogeneous groups. Your knowledge of crystal harmonics could revolutionize how we approach certain types of engineering challenges. Think about it, Pavel suggested. You don't have to decide right now. But the offer stands, and the first assignment doesn't start for another 2 weeks. That would give you time to consider whether you want to try something new. 1. Zira looked around the diner, taking in the worn furniture and flickering lights that represented the limits of her current existence. Then she looked at the 3 humans who had appeared like guardian angels to offer her not just protection but genuine opportunity for a better future. I'd like to try, she said quietly. I'd like to try very much. Sarah smiled and extended her hand for a formal handshake. Welcome to Chen Engineering Solutions, Zira Thalves. I think this is going to be the beginning of a very productive partnership. As Zira grasped the offered hand, she felt something she hadn't experienced since the accident that destroyed her old life. Hope. The human's casual competence and genuine care suggested that perhaps the galaxy still held possibilities she had never imagined. 2 hours later, Zira found herself aboard the human ship Times Practical Magic Asterisk, a converted cargo hauler that had been extensively modified for deep space engineering operations. The vessel's interior was a fascinating blend of cutting-edge technology and practical repairs, with every surface serving multiple purposes and every component optimized for efficiency under extreme conditions. Most of our work happens in places where calling for backup isn't an option, Sarah explained as she gave Zira a tour of the ship's workshop area. So we've learned to be self-sufficient and to adapt our equipment for whatever problems we encounter. The workshop was larger than Zira's entire living quarters back on the station, filled with tools she didn't recognize, alongside familiar items like plasma cutters and gravitational manipulators. What caught her attention most, however, were the crystal formations growing in specialized chambers along one wall. Synthetic crystal matrices, Pavel explained, noticing her interest. We grow them for various applications: data storage, frequency generation, structural reinforcement. Nothing as sophisticated as what your people can do, but functional for most engineering purposes. 8. Zira approached the growing crystals with professional curiosity, her trained eye immediately identifying several inefficiencies in their formation patterns. The harmonic resonance is slightly off, she said, more to herself than to her hosts. If you adjusted the frequency by approximately 3.7% and increased the ambient temperature by 4 degrees, you could improve the structural integrity by at least 15%. The 3 humans exchanged glances, and Marcus pulled out a tablet to record her observations. How can you tell just by looking at them? He asked. It's hard to explain to someone who hasn't grown up around crystals, Zira said, then paused as she realized what she had just done. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to criticize your work. I'm sure your methods are perfectly adequate for your needs. Don't apologize for being good at something, Sarah said firmly. That's exactly the kind of expertise we need. Pavel, can you implement those adjustments? Already on it, Pavel replied, moving to modify the crystal growing chamber's settings. This is why we need diverse perspectives. We've been accepting 12% efficiency losses for months because we didn't know they were possible to correct. As Pavel made the adjustments, Zira found herself relaxing for the first time in years. The humans treated her knowledge as valuable rather than irrelevant, and their enthusiasm for problem-solving reminded her of her pre-accident studies. She was beginning to understand why humans had such a reputation for engineering excellence. They approached every challenge with genuine curiosity, rather than rigid adherence to established methods. Speaking of challenges, Marcus said, consulting his own tablet, we should probably discuss what happened back at the diner. The Crimson Claw doesn't typically forget grudges, and they've got enough resources to make trouble for anyone who crosses them. Let them try, Sarah said with a confidence that seemed almost reckless to Zira. We've dealt with their type before. Have you really? Zira asked. I mean, they're professional killers. They have military-grade weapons and training. How can 3 engineers stand against something like that? Want to see? Pavel asked with a grin. He led them to another section of the ship, where a large holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of the local space sector. Computer. Show current status of Crimson Claw operations in this system. The display shifted to highlight several ships and installations, with data streams showing their current activities, supply lines, and organizational structure. Zira stared at the comprehensive intelligence network in amazement. How do you have access to all this information? She asked. We built most of their infrastructure, Marcus explained, matter-of-factly. Communication relays, life support systems, weapons maintenance facilities, fuel processing plants. When you install and maintain the technology that keeps an organization running, you tend to know where all the switches are. Sarah pointed to one of the displayed ships. That's the vessel our Vorthan friends from the diner are currently aboard. The Times Crimson Talon Asterisk, a modified destroyer-class ship with some very expensive modifications. Want to guess who installed their new gravitational shielding system last month? You did, Zira said, beginning to understand the implications. And the enhanced communications array, Pavel added, and the upgraded targeting computers for their main weapons. The beautiful thing about being engineers, Marcus continued, is that we don't just fix things. We understand how they work, which means we understand how they stop working. To demonstrate, Sarah activated a control interface and began typing commands. On the holographic display, the Times Crimson Talon Asterisk status indicators began showing various yellow warning lights as non-critical systems developed minor malfunctions. Nothing dangerous, Sarah assured Zira, who was watching with fascination and growing alarm. Just annoying. Their shower system will provide water that's either too hot or too cold, but never the right temperature. Their food synthesizers will work perfectly, but everything will taste slightly off. Their artificial gravity will fluctuate by just enough to be noticeable, but not enough to cause real problems. Communication delays will increase by random intervals, Pavel added cheerfully, and their entertainment systems will develop a tendency to cut out during the most interesting parts of shows. Death by 1,000 minor inconveniences, Marcus concluded. Most mercenary organizations depend on maintaining morale through comfortable living conditions between jobs. Take that away, and they start questioning whether their current employer is worth the frustration. Zira watched the ship's status display continue degrading in small but persistent ways. This is how you handle threats? You make their lives annoying? Sometimes, Sarah said. It's amazing how effective psychological pressure can be when applied correctly. Most people would rather face a direct confrontation than deal with constant low-level irritation that they can't identify or fix. But what if they figure out you're responsible? Zira asked. Then we escalate to more serious measures. Pavel replied, his tone becoming noticeably colder. Marcus. Show her the Blackwater Station incident. Marcus pulled up historical records on his tablet, displaying news footage of a massive space station that had suffered what appeared to be a catastrophic systems failure. 6 months ago, the Crimson Claw decided to take over Blackwater Station and turn it into a base of operations. They killed the administrator and terrorized the civilian population into compliance. The footage showed human engineers arriving at the station, ostensibly to perform routine maintenance on critical systems. Within hours of their arrival, however, the station began experiencing cascading failures that forced a complete evacuation. Artificial gravity failed in specific patterns that herded everyone toward the escape pods, Sarah explained. Life support remained functional, but atmospheric composition shifted to make people feel increasingly uncomfortable. Emergency systems activated and deactivated in sequences that made staying aboard psychologically unbearable. The Crimson Claw operatives were the first ones off the station, Marcus added with satisfaction. Turns out, trained killers become remarkably cooperative when they think they're about to die in a mechanical disaster they can't fight or understand. The station was repaired and reopened within a week, Pavel concluded, under new management that had no connection to criminal organizations. Amazing how quickly infrastructure problems can be resolved when you remove the root cause. Zira stared at the three humans with new understanding. They weren't just engineers, they were a form of immune system for civilized space, quietly removing threats through methods that most people would never suspect or understand. "How many of you are there?" she asked quietly. "Enough," Sarah replied. "Human engineering firms operate throughout the galaxy, maintaining the infrastructure that keeps civilization functioning. We talk to each other, share information about problems and solutions. Word spreads quickly when someone threatens installations under our care. It's not a formal organization," Marcus clarified. "More like a professional network with shared values. We believe that technology should serve people, not the other way around. When someone uses force to disrupt that principle, we tend to take it personally." A soft chime from the ship's communication system interrupted the conversation. Pavel checked the incoming message and smiled. "Speak of the devil. The Times Crimson Talon Times just requested emergency maintenance support. Apparently they're experiencing unexpected systems difficulties. There. I'm readed." "When that readed. How unfortunate," Sarah said with mock sympathy. "I suppose we're too busy to respond immediately. Maybe in a few days, after we've finished our current project." "What's our current project?" Zira asked. "Getting you properly equipped and trained for deep space engineering work," Marcus replied. "Starting with that medical treatment we discussed." Sarah activated another display showing a nearby medical facility that specialized in treating injury-related disabilities. "Dr. Elizabeth Torres runs a clinic on Harmony Station, about 6 hours travel from here. She's worked with draconian physiology before, and has some experimental treatments that might restore partial function to your wings. The procedures are expensive," Pavel added, "but they're covered under our medical package. Part of the benefit of working with humans, we take care of our team members." Zira felt tears forming again as she processed the reality of her changed circumstances. Less than 12 hours ago, she had been a disabled outcast, surviving on charity in a forgotten corner of space. Now she was part of a team that commanded enough respect and resources to casually manipulate criminal organizations while offering her medical treatment that could change her life. "I don't understand why you're doing all this," she said. "It can't just be because I know about crystal harmonics." "You're right," Sarah admitted. "It's because you reminded us why we do this job in the first place." "I don't follow," Zira said. "We started out as engineers because we wanted to build things, to solve problems, to make the galaxy a better place," Marcus explained. "Somewhere along the way, it becomes easy to forget that the technology we maintain serves real people with real lives and real problems. Watching those mercenaries hurt, you reminded us that our work isn't just about keeping machines functional," Pavel added. "It's about protecting the people who depend on those machines to live safely and with dignity. Besides," Sarah concluded with a grin, "humans have always had a soft spot for underdogs. Something about our evolutionary history makes us want to protect individuals who are smaller and more vulnerable than ourselves." "Even when those individuals aren't human?" Zira asked. "Especially then," Marcus replied. "Some of our best teammates over the years have been non-human. Different perspectives lead to better solutions, and better solutions make everyone's lives easier." The ship's navigation system chimed to announce their approach to Harmony Station. Through the viewport, Zira could see the medical facility's distinctive architecture, designed to accommodate patients from dozens of different species with varying environmental needs. "Ready for this?" Sarah asked gently. Zira looked at her damaged wings, then at the three humans who had rescued her from despair and offered her a future she had never imagined possible. "Yes," she said with growing confidence. "I'm ready." As the Times Practical Magic Times docked at Harmony Station, Zira reflected on the events of the past day. She had learned that the galaxy contained both cruelty and kindness, that strength could be gentle, and that protection could come from unexpected sources. Most importantly, she had discovered that humans were far more than the simple technicians she had believed them to be. They were guardians of civilization, protectors of the vulnerable, and champions of the principle that technology should serve those who needed it most. She was proud to join their ranks, and eager to contribute her own skills to their ongoing mission of making the galaxy a safer and more just place for everyone. The adventure was just beginning, but for the first time since the mining accident that had destroyed her old life, Zira looked toward the future with hope and anticipation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them as part of a team that valued her contributions and cared about her well-being. In the end, that made all the difference.